Welcome to the beautiful land of Bulgaria. Sloping hills, Orthodox churches, and lovely people. Bulgaria is often left out of the discussion of Europe. No one really knows who they are, where they are, and what they have done over the past 300 years. So I will take it upon myself to inform the masses of the past 100 and some years of Bulgarian history. The nation of Bulgaria began many trillions of years ago as single-celled organisms, ever slowly growing and evolving into more complex creatures. However, after a few series of oopsies during the Second Bulgarian Empire, the nation fell to the Ottomans in the late 1300s. The nation remained snuffed between the bosom of the Sultanate for hundreds of years. An uprising against the Ottomans in 1876 by Bulgarian nationals, known as the April Uprising, sparked conflict in the region. Brutal reprisals were carried out by the Ottomans in return, sparking outrage across Europe. Outrage felt strongest in Russia. Along came the Russians in 1877 to defend their Slavic brethren and smack the Ottoman Empire around, vodka style. Smack around the Ottomans were, and in 1878, less than a year after the war began, the Russian Empire was victorious. The nation of Bulgaria was originally born of the first treaty to end this war, the Treaty of San Stefano. However, Bulgaria was too thick for the liking of some nations, who circumcised Bulgaria a few months later in the Treaty of Berlin, which sought to restructure the original gains of Russia to keep the balance of power in Europe. With independence came resentment, as much of the land considered Bulgarian was stripped away by the Treaty of Berlin. Numerous underground cells in Macedonia and Thrace were formed with the goal of integrating with Bulgaria, the most famous being the IMRO. In the coming decades, ethnic Bulgarians would migrate from these lands into Bulgaria. Two main political factions formed following independence. The liberals, favoring a union of intelligentsia and peasantry in political power, and conservatives, who wanted to limit the political power of the peasant class by having two parliamentary houses, one greater, one lesser. The first constitution featured a single parliamentary house with universal male suffrage. At the helm of the nation was Prince Alexander of Battenberg, a German-born nobleman ruling Bulgaria on behalf of the Russian Empire. Following the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, the prince and the conservative faction went after the power of the parliament, suspending the constitution. This lasted until 1883, when it was restored. In 1885, Bulgaria formed a union with its southern neighbor Rumelia, causing anger in Russia and in neighboring nations like Greece and Serbia. In what would become known as the Serbo-Bulgarian War, Bulgaria faced the Serbian army off at Slivnica, winning a decisive victory. Austria-Hungary broke up the fighting shortly after, allowing Bulgarian unification and victory over the Serbians. Shortly after the Bulgarian victory, Prince Alexander was ousted in a coup by pro-Russian elements of the military. A counter-coup led by Stefan Stambolov, the Bismarck of Bulgaria, led to a pseudo-democratic state under the regency of Stambolov. Under his rule, Bulgaria industrialized rapidly and did away with elements of the Ottoman cultural and administrative customs. Perhaps Stambolov's most important contribution was his ability to secure Ferdinand, another German prince, as his successor monarch, because less than a decade after he came to power, he was shot and stabbed in the head by Macedonian nationalists. Despite the rise of capitalism under Stambolov, the country remained largely rural. Additionally, the Bulgarian Socialist Party was founded during Stambolov's reign, foreshadowing the political strife to come. The beginnings of Ferdinand's reign was marred by issues involving the Macedonians still on the other side of the Ottoman border. Macedonian IMRO forces revolted time and time again, and despite support amongst Bulgarian society, they were forced to withhold aid due to Russian pressure. Despite strikes and riots in Bulgaria during the mid to late 1900s, Ferdinand and his semi-democratic parliamentary democracy remained strong. Following the Young Turks' ascension to power in Turkey and the Turkish-Italian War of 1911, Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Montenegro formed the Balkan League and declared war in October of 1912 to remove the Ottomans from Thrace. The Ottomans were routed, only managing to hold on to Constantinople and small surrounding areas. With the removal of Kebab, the Balkan League came crashing down as the unresolved Macedonian issue reared its very ugly head. Bulgarian dispute over Macedonian territory resulted in a war within the Balkan League. Turkey and Romania joined the war, while Bulgaria was occupied with Serbia and Greece, throwing haymakers behind Bulgaria's back like the bitch-ass pussies they are. Finally, after the end of the Second Balkan War, with Bulgarian defeat, peace came to the Balkans. For about a year, then Gavrilo Princip gave the Archduke Franz Ferdinand a whack-ass haircut. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire threw a hissy fit, causing the First World War. Bulgaria remained neutral until October 1915. This is due to political pressure from both the Entente and Central Powers, who courted the Bulgarian nation immediately following the Balkan Wars. It is also due to economic and military struggles resulting from their defeat in the Second Balkan War. The diplomatic duel between the Entente and Central Powers over Bulgarian allegiance went back and forth for more than a year, with concessions of territory being offered to the Bulgarian nation. However, as the war in the Balkans turned against the Allies, and the Central Powers guaranteed the Bulgarian nation Macedonian territory, Tsar Ferdinand decided to join the Central Powers. This is despite popular support being more towards the Allied camp, with Bulgarian volunteers having traveled to Russia to join their military on the outbreak of World War I. The surprise offensive by Bulgaria resulted in a rapid advance, with most territory stripped from Bulgaria by the Treaty of Berlin falling back under Bulgarian control. Despite a counterattack by British and French troops from Salonika, the Bulgarians held firm along the Greek border and entrenched themselves into solid defensive positions. By 1916, much of northern Greece came under Bulgarian control. Additionally, the Bulgarian army played an important role in neutralizing Romania when they joined the war that same year, striking through southern Romania, capturing Constanta and Dobruja. It was during this southward strike that the famous Bulgarian general Ivan Kolev achieved fame, having used Bulgarian cavalry immensely well in the battles against Romanian and Russian infantry. The Bulgarian military, having achieved their territorial ambitions, now played a defensive game, and began trying to deal with increasing unrest in occupied territories and at home. An autumn offensive in 1916 by Entente powers gained a bit of land in southwestern Macedonia before being stopped dead in their tracks by staunch and determined Bulgarian forces. All was not well for the Bulgarians, however, as discontent mounted in the country. The nation was still reeling from the Balkan Wars, having lost tens of thousands of young men. Additionally, the economy had not recovered, and the strain placed on it with this new war was considerable. Tension was mounting between Bulgaria and Germany as well, with much of the goods made within Bulgaria going directly to supporting the German war effort due to German economic dominance over the nation. Following the February Revolution in Russia, Bolshevik propaganda also began to be spread throughout the Bulgarian nation. Soldiers began forming soldiers' committees within their ranks. Anti-war protests saw crowds in the tens of thousands, and riots spread throughout Bulgaria. Additionally, the Treaty of Bucharest in 1918, which saw Romania out of the war, gave Bulgaria a part of Dobruja, but gave Germany complete control over the region's infrastructure and multiple economic concessions. This treaty embarrassed the government of Bulgaria, leading to the abdication of the Prime Minister, Radoslavov, and his cabinet, and a new government under Alexander Malinov being formed. Poor conditions in Bulgaria were soon worsened with a decisive defeat at Dobropole, causing the Bulgarian army to almost completely collapse. A soldiers' revolt sprouting up outside of Sofia was crushed by German troops desperately trying to maintain order on the Macedonian front. However, despite German attempts to reintroduce order, Tsar Ferdinand was forced to abdicate by the Bulgarian government, and Boris III was put in his place. Shortly thereafter, the Bulgarian military signed an armistice, having lost so much so rapidly. On the next episode of Bulgarian History, we will discuss the immediate aftermath of the First World War, the casualties, the politics, and the Bulgarian role in the next major European conflict. Stay tuned.